Hey, welcome back to Media Talks TV with your host, Tony J. If you're new here, hit the like, share, and subscribe. Got more videos coming up. This episode is a very special episode, and I'm going to be talking about a particular issue that has impacted me the last 10 years since I've been a resident of Baltimore. And that is, today marks the 10th anniversary of the Freddie Gray Riots. And I know there's going to be a lot of news people talking about Freddie Gray and what's happened to Baltimore since Freddie Gray's death. But on this channel, I'm going to give you my personal perspective about how it impacted me as a fellow Baltimorean and how it's impacted my city, and also really the impact and what was the outcome after those riots. Because for a very long time, when we talk about the era of Black Lives Matter and the movements that ensued, um, out of all those police shootings, what made the Freddie Gray situation very unique as compared to the other incidences of police brutality where, we had Trayvon Martin and then Ferguson, Michael Brown, and then we had one incident in Charlotte. I forgot the name of that. And right after the Michael Brown incident and the Ferguson unrest that happened in December of 2014, it was something in the air, even at that time that I witnessed, and I wouldn't thought I didn't really believe that it would happen, but I felt as though Freddie Gray's death was different in that it really wasn't categorized as a racial incident, but an indictment basically on policing in urban communities. You know, when you think about riots, what comes to mind is things from the 60s, 1967, Detroit, Newark, Watts, and 1967 was when you started seeing a lot of urban cities get engaged in rioting, mainly because of the issue of policing. But when we talk about the issue of policing, it doesn't really get categorized as a civil, well, it didn't really get categorized as a civil rights issue during the 60s because it was a northern problem, not necessarily a southern problem in the way that Dr. King had saw it. But what makes northern, what makes those incidences different from what we saw in the images that we saw from down south when we saw the Birmingham and Salma and all these other things happen and the lunch counter incidences. What made the northern issue vastly different was it was an issue, of course, about just policing minorities. And when you had places like Chicago, Detroit, New York, LA having issues with policing, well, that doesn't go away. It just, the problem kind of resets itself when new leaders come into the fray. So when you have the 65 Watts riots, and of course, when you have Newark and Detroit riots, those, of course, were issues centered around policing. And it just kind of like reset itself during the 70s. Then came the Miami riots in the 80s, and then, of course, preceding the LA riots. And what's so unique about April 2 is most uprisings that I kind of found out to be true is that most uprisings in the United States happen in April. So when you think about Dr. King's assassination, that led to a lot of uprisings on April 4th. And then the LA riots was on, I believe, April 29th, 1992. Correct me if I'm wrong. But every time there was an uprising or civil unrest, it always happened in April, which I don't know if it's a coincidence or what. You can correct me if I'm wrong. You know, hit the comment box. We want to have a discussion about this. But back to my main point. At like all things, Freddie Gray was different because it put things at a crossroads, and Freddie Gray's death signals somewhat of a reset for Baltimore. And that reset led to a lot of chaotic violence in my city, violence that even claimed the life of a longtime friend of mine. But when the Freddie Gray riots happened, I remember it was a social media frenzy that happened right after it. And I kept seeing pictures on Facebook around April of that time. I was still in college. I was in my final years of college. And it was like I was, you know, it felt like during that time I was transitioning into something major. Felt like things were different during that time and the climate was just hot. But when his death happened, I was just in school. I didn't watch too much of the news, but then I saw the Facebook postings, and a lot of it was fuck 12. I seen a lot of F12s on my postings on Facebook. Um, and then I started seeing stuff from this thing called the Purge. And I remember, when we talk about the history and when people are going to be writing about this, they're going to have to go back and scour those postings because a lot of this civil unrest was driven by social media. So this was a first for all of us that knew anything. The police couldn't get a handle on it. Nobody knew what was about to happen, but they knew that feelings from the youth were simmering in the city because everybody had saw that video of Freddie Gray yelling and crying while he was being put into the wagon. And so many people posted that video online and it just reverberated. And it just showed you, even that day and even that month, how social media can create and reverberate social unrest like we never had seen it before. So the video, I saw the video online, Freddie Gray screaming. And when I first saw it, I was like, damn. Mm. And I was like, you scroll up and you see all that, and then you hear, you know, you had a lot of people posting, oh, we gonna fuck some shit up. Uh yeah, tonight we gonna burn something down. I started seeing those postings, and then it just started to simmer and simmer and simmer. And then we got to from April 12th all the way up to the 15th. And then when we got to the 15th, we started seeing protests. Then WJZ made the coverage of Freddie Gray, and then I started to see more and more stories about Freddie Gray, and then I started seeing pictures and pictures and pictures all posted up. And there was kind of like this cross between, well, traditional media discussing the case and then what was happening on social media. And social media was having its time in the light because it was a cauldron pot of conversation going on in these secret spaces that even cops didn't know about it. And then there was word that people were preparing to do something and the cops didn't know what to do. And when the cops didn't know what to do, of course, you know, I believe Anthony Batts was the commissioner at the time. And of course, they said that something was happening, that word got out that there was a gang truce. I heard that part, and that part reverberated around the news. And then you started hearing about Black Guerrilla, BGF gang members teaming up, Bloods and Crips teaming up, and then people in the city jail on Eager Street talking about they was going to fuck some shit up. And all these things culminated, but that was just mere speculation. But it was the media, also social media and the media, traditional media, taking these whisperings and these murmurings in the air because they didn't want another Ferguson on their hands. And of course, when the funeral happened for Freddie Gray, you started seeing people come into town protesting during that time. NAACP, everybody came into town. And then they said they was going to shut down the Oreo game. I remember that. That was the first part. They was going to shut down the Oreo game. They wanted nobody to go to an Oreo game. And they started marching downtown on Utah Street while everybody was in the bar. Um, while everybody was in the bar drinking and having fun and going to the games. And then you started seeing marches and peaceful protests and how it started. Because I feel as though, when people talk about, the riot, they say, well, it was a handful of criminals that started the shit. But really, if you look back at the footage where it started with the protesters on Utah Street. And as the protesters were walking around Utah Street, of course, somebody threw glasses of beer at the protesters. That's how it started. That's how it started. When you have people that are sports fans and they go downtown and they see protesters, where it really started was when white people and white guys were throwing beers and throwing drinks and glasses at peaceful protesters. That's how it started. And then it culminated from there to the iconic picture when the young man took the cone and smashed a police window. That's when shit really got bad. He smashed that police window. But the reaction, what I want to go back to is the reaction. When somebody said, who started who? It wasn't the protesters that started this shit. It was those guys down at Utah Street that was at the Oreo game. They were drinking at the bar, and somebody threw beer at those protesters. And from there, when I seen the pictures, I knew it was about to get worse. I knew from that day forward, it gets worse. We get to the 12th, we get to the 15th, then we get to the 27th. And this is where it all culminates. 27th was when I believe they buried Freddie Gray. And while the funeral was happening, people, the buses that were coming from Douglas were going down Gwynns Falls Parkway near Mondawmin. Police was stationed up there. They said something was going to happen. Something bad was going to happen. There was going to be a purge this afternoon after Freddie Gray is buried. There's going to be a purge. So then they saw the social media. They didn't take it seriously at first. So then they saw the social media uh, postings, and then Commissioner Batts assembled his people down near Mondawmin, and then they said, "Okay, cut off all the bus services to Mondawmin, then cut off the metro." And they said the metro couldn't go to Mondawmin, the metro couldn't go to the buses couldn't go down to Mondawmin anymore. They wanted to divert more people from coming down to Mondawmin. And then when they had the cops assembled and all the kids were down there. They were throwing bricks. They started throwing bricks at the police officers, and that's when the shit just popped off. Like it was bad. It was real bad. And I remember that day. I'm coming home from school, and I see on TV students upon students, a whole bunch of students with bricks and rocks and glass bottles in their hand, throwing it at the cops, and the cops couldn't contain it. And it just got so crazy. One cop, I believe, got hurt, was bruised. They had their riot gear on, and it was just it felt like when I saw the images, it just felt like a just a dark day, and so much of that, it just felt like a dark cloud hung over the city that day. And I remember my parents getting off of work. They had shut down the whole entire city. Buses were being rerouted. Buses couldn't go uptown. Buses were rerouted and redirected. They couldn't go anywhere else. The Mayor Blake at the time, she said something. She got on TV. They had a command center where everybody meet. And then she said, okay, of course, the infamous quote, "Give everybody space to destroy." And I was like, man, this is bad. This is real bad. Most mayors would have gave the directive to shoot to kill. And I knew something was going on. It was something weird. I mean, you don't want a bloodbath on your hands, and I think that was really going through Stephanie Rawlins Blake's mind. But you definitely do not want to give the directive to destroy things. And once she had said give people enough space to destroy things, I think that was kind of the nail in the coffin of her career as mayor of the city. After that, there was no way nobody was going to elect this woman again. And of course, the command center, there was, things were getting out of hand after the Mondawmin incident. And after the bricks were thrown, and of course, kids were lining up with ski masks on, throwing bricks at the cops, and it just got so out of hand that the mayhem moved from Mondawmin to Pennsylvania, all the way back, all the way down to Pennsylvania Avenue. It's like they pushed them all the way down there. Governor Hogan at the time wanted to bring in the National Guard. It was crazy. And I remember I came home and it was everywhere. It was on every TV. It was on CNN. It was on ABC. It was on Channel 13. I went to sleep that night. They had tore up Pennsylvania Avenue. They burnt down a couple of stores on Pennsylvania Avenue, loot and destroyed Pennsylvania Avenue. Somebody cut a fire hose line to keep the firefighters from putting out the fire on Pennsylvania Avenue. It got so crazy that when I went to sleep that night, because I had an exam. I had a midterm exam the next day. I could not sleep because the amount of helicopters flying over the city at night. I kept my window open because I needed to get some fresh air and a breeze in my room because it was so hot that day. And I went to sleep and I woke up and I still heard the helicopters. It's like a thundering sound of helicopters just all over the city. And I got an email the next day from my professor in geology. He said, even though in light of what is happening at this moment, you still got to come in and take your midterm exam. So please show up to class on time. Thank you. I got that letter and I still didn't understand. I'm like, I'm studying in the midst of chaos. I still got to take an exam despite what is going on in the city. There are no buses running. I had to take a I had to take a Uber. Most times I take my mother dropped me off, but I had to go back up to Towson just to go to that one class to take that midterm, and I still didn't feel ready for that midterm. And of course, I got an F for it. But it goes to show you, you know, even in the midst of trying to do the right thing, sometimes, you know, while you're trying to get your degree, while you're trying to do everything right, the world changes and the world shifts before your very eyes. And Freddie Gray's death really impacted my city in a worse way. But we've gotten out of that darkness, the darkness that brought us to really a dark period in our city's history. Because not since the '68 riots did we have such a dark period. And even the remnants of the '68 riots downtown, I'm often reminded by my parents and by my uncle about how it impacted them as their youth when they saw the cars and the trucks and the militia and the National Guard come into their city after Dr. King was assassinated. It's still remnants of that. Even the castle was downtown, you know, where the military men came out. My parents often remind me because when they saw the imagery on TV, they saw the King riots all over again in the back of their minds. People burning and looting. But what was crazy was, there was you know, I'm often reminded how, my parents often remind me of how impactful the '68 riots was on them. And it seemed like this was vastly different because this impacted opportunities for the city. People started leaving after the Freddie Gray riots. There was just this immense chaos for the next 10 years, and now, you know Stephanie Rawlins Blake doesn't run for another term as mayor. We had 344 shootings that year. And then the state's prosecutor that wanted to prosecute the police officers that did it because it was kind of 50-50. It's three black police officers and three white police officers. So it couldn't be an issue of race at all, you know. And of course, she became the most unpopular person in the city, and they removed her, and then they put Ivan Bates in, and now you're seeing that the city's murder rate, which really spiked during that time period, our murder rate has really finally gone back down. People are really moving back into the city, but during that dark time period, we had so many murders happening in the city that we didn't know where the hell it was going to stop. I mean, it just took the wind out of you. People left. We had a decrease in population, immense decrease in population. We started seeing businesses shut down. People burnt down the CVS store in Pennsylvania Avenue. Stuff that were vital and that we needed in our communities in order to survive. And it was like kind of you cut your nose to spite your face, even though they felt as though they made an impact. They did a lot of damage, irreversible damage, and that's what riots do. Riots create irreversible damages to communities because now where's the money coming from? You loot and burn down a store, nobody's going to want to open up that store back in that community ever again. You go out and you loot and you rob and you kill, nobody's going to want to take you serious. So it was like a two-pronged situation. Those that were protesting the death of Freddie Gray and those that were looting and robbing and shooting and killing in the name of Freddie Gray had made an affront to that man's name. So when you have a civil rights issue and crime and criminality on the other hand of that, it creates a cauldron pot of issues that, you know, can't be handled directly. And it seems like, my city, Baltimore, went through an experimental issue with policing because we had the consent decree and we had to fix the issue of policing in Baltimore. And I think Freddie Gray shouldn't have had to die for that to have happened. You know, I don't think his death should have been the catalyst to make that happen. But like so many things, martyrdom was the thing that fixed the Baltimore City Police Department. Because before that, policing in Baltimore was very, very bad. You couldn't stand on a corner without getting locked up or getting a summons thrown at you. or getting picked up for unlawful loitering in a drug free zone, which always used to be the case in our city, and then getting ticketed for speeding. It got so bad. It was like they put their foot on the necks of the police officers in the city because things had to dramatically change. And Freddie Gray's death was the result of that. Now you're seeing new buildings going up, new housing development. A murder homes, a murder mall is gone. Now it's a brand new development on Utah Street. So much progress is happening in Baltimore, and I think Baltimore's potential is now back to being a shining example of what could be done to change certain issues within the city. We're handling violent crime like never before. People are being prosecuted for violent acts thanks to Ivan Bates. People are being held accountable for gun violence like never before. And now we're seeing a renaissance happen in Baltimore that we haven't seen in a very long time since Freddie Gray. But his death turned a lot of things around for the city, and that needs to be acknowledged. We're in a better place. I do truly believe that Baltimore has turned a corner. There's still work to be done, no doubt, but Baltimore has turned a corner from all this. And I think there needs to be a pause to acknowledge what's been done and the amount of progress. We went through two mayors, one corrupt, one interim, to now we have the violent crime rate going down. Carjacking is still an issue in my city. We're still at the precipice of turning a corner. All thanks to the death of Freddie Gray. His death was a catalyst for this change. This has been another Media Talks TV. I'm your host, Tony J. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And be sure to subscribe and hit that like because we got more videos coming soon. I'm out. Peace. Rest in peace, Freddie Gray.